Secretary Rubio, given changes to U.S. immigration policies, there are some Jamaicans who are afraid to travel back to Jamaica, even though they are legitimate green card holders. What assurances can you give to those individuals that they will have no difficulty returning to the United States?
Well, yeah, well, green card, quickly, green card or residency? I mean, permanent residence. You're asking me about? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And secondly, what problems, if any, does America have with China's investment in Jamaica?
Well, look, I mean, China's a rich and powerful country. Our problem is not investment. Okay. Our problem is predatory practices. That's what we're concerned about. What we have seen all over the world is that China comes in and says, here's a bunch of money for a project they never build. They bring their own workers to do the work. They don't hire the locals. They bring their own workers. And oftentimes it comes attached with a huge loan that can never be repaid, and now they hold it over your head forever. That's our concern. Our concern is unfair practices, too, where they come in, they're government-subsidized companies, underbid everybody because they're subsidized, but then they come back and charge you whatever they want because now they've got the contract. So these are the things that we remain very concerned about. Again, not specifically about Jamaica, but in general. And so that's what we'll continue to highlight. On the first point, I would say, let me talk about that. If you're a green card holder, you're not illegally in the United States. If you're a green card holder, you are legally in the United States. What the president has said, and I don't know how anybody can disagree with this, every country in the world has immigration laws. And immigration laws, if you don't enforce them, you don't have immigration laws. Over the last few years, we've had, 13, 14, 15 million people enter the United States unlawfully and irregularly. No country in the world can assume that. By the way, that's not unique to us. Right? Even here in Jamaica, you face challenges of migration. And it's not that we don't sympathize with people that are leaving difficult circumstances. It's that no society can absorb mass migration from anywhere in the world. You just can't do it. And we're facing that challenge. That's not specific to Jamaica. I'm just speaking in general. And so the president is doing something that, frankly, hasn't been done in a long time. He's enforcing our immigration laws. And that's what we're doing. So if you're a green card holder, you're not illegally in the United States. I think the challenge is for those who are illegally in the United States, we have to have immigration laws. They have to be followed. I mean, I don't know why that's an unreasonable demand. And frankly, I mean, Jamaica is not a major source of illegal migration, to be frank. It's not even in the top 10 or top 20, for that matter, I don't think. But that said, we are enforcing our immigration laws. Because here's what happens if you don't. You'll get another 12 million people. And if tomorrow Jamaica announced anybody who wants to come can come in, you're going to get a lot of people too, and you know it's going to be very disruptive. So we need to have immigration laws, and we need to enforce them, and that's what we are. That's what the president is doing. That's what he promised voters he would do, and that's what we're going to continue to do. But if you're a green card holder, you're legally in the United States, unless, and I say this because a lot of these people come, unless you're some student visa holder who's a sympathizer of some terrorist organization and is running around in our streets like a lunatic, burning down buildings and attacking students at universities. If you're one of these lunatics that's going to put on a mask over your face and break into a student union center and harass students, and we wouldn't have let you in the first place. If you had told us that, if you told us, I'm going to America not just to study at your university, but to tear up your campus, we would have never let you in. And if you do that, once you come into the United States, we're going to kick you out. We're going to do that. And I don't care what terrorist organization you're supporting, we're going to kick you out. If you're a gang member, we're going to kick you out. Okay? If you're one of these violent gang members that's coming to the United States, then we're going to kick you out. That we're going to do. There's no doubt about it. But the president's very committed to that. And but if you're a green card holder and you're not any of these things, you're going to be fine.
President Ali, you've already spoken about how President Trump's tariff plans for Chinese ships could affect regional trade. I just wanted to know if in your trade talks today, if that issue was specifically discussed. What assurances can you give Guyana and this hemisphere in terms of stemming indirect consequences?
Yes, well, look, the goal the president has in doing so is we need to have an ability to build ships in this world that don't just come from China. Okay, I think it's just dangerous to have one country in the world building all the ships. I assure you that, and we don't want a war, but I mean, they're not going to build ships for us if we get in trouble, right? So we need to have alternatives to Chinese shipping. We're trying to create a market and a demand for alternatives to Chinese shipping construction. And I'm the first one to admit that the United States made a terrible mistake when we deindustrialized and we allowed all these industries to leave our country and go to other places. Now we're paying the consequences, but we have to fix it. So I do believe, I can't speak, the trade portfolio does not belong to the Department of State, but I do believe that we will take this back because we've heard this not just here, Mr. President. We've heard it throughout our visits here in the Caribbean. And we're going to take it back and explain to those who are in charge of trade policy that there are some implications to applying it to certain nations who are partners and who are seeking to develop their economies in ways that I think serve the national interest of the United States, not to mention the national interest of our partner nations, and see what can happen. So I can't make a commitment to those exemptions because that's not something we handle at the Department of State. What I can commit to is that I will most certainly raise this issue as a recurring issue in multiple places, that it would have a real, detrimental effect on economic development. Maybe in 10 years it won't be an issue because there's been some diversification, maybe in 5. But right now it would be problematic. That message I'll take back to Washington and to my colleagues that are handling the trade portfolio, and we'll see how the president decides to proceed. But rest assured, we will take that message back.
Could you confirm there's no reporting that 300 visas, the Department has revoked 300?
Maybe more. Might be more than 300 at this point. We do it every day. Every time I find one of these lunatics, I take away their visa.
You're saying it could be more than 300?
Sure. I hope. At some point, I hope we run out because we've gotten rid of all of them. But we're looking every day for these lunatics that are tearing things up. And by the way, we want to get rid of gang members too. So Venezuela sent us a bunch of gang members. I'm sure you've heard of Tren de Aragua, Mr. President. Terrible gang, vicious gang. They flooded in there. Yesterday, just so everybody knows, yesterday, one of these gang members who was involved in New York City in attacking a police officer was deported back to Venezuela because they're now taking flights again, because of some strong measures we've taken. And this guy lands. This guy's a guy that attacked a police officer in New York City and laughed about it in court with a smirk on his face. When he gets off the plane in Venezuela, he's welcomed by this character named Diosdado Cabello. I don't know if you've heard of this guy. And he welcomes in hugging the guy. So does anybody have any doubt that these people are pushing these people into the United States to destabilize us in the region? Yeah, we're looking for people like this, and we want to get them out of the United States. Absolutely.
Mr. Secretary, Republican Congressman Don...
He came with me. Don't say I don't take you to nice places.
And thank you for the hospitality. Beautiful weather, beautiful country. Much appreciated.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Mr. Secretary, Republican Congressman Don Bacon weighed in on the Signal chat breach, saying the White House is, quote, in denial that this was not classified or sensitive data. They should just own up to it and preserve credibility. Do you think that's true?
Let me just say on the Signal thing. This thing was set up for purposes of coordinating how everyone was going to call. When these things happen, I need to call foreign ministers, especially of our close allies. We need to notify members of Congress. Other members of the team have different people they need to notify as well. And that was the purpose of why it was set up. Obviously, someone made a mistake. Someone made a big mistake and added a journalist. Nothing against journalists, but you ain't supposed to be on that thing. So they got on there and this happened. I've been, so I can speak to myself or my presence on it. I think my role on it was just speaking for my role. I contributed to it twice. I identified my point of contact, which is my chief of staff. And then later on, I think 3 hours after the White House's official announcements had been made, I congratulated the members of the team. I've been assured by the Pentagon and everyone involved that none of the information that was on there, though not intended to be divulged, obviously that was a mistake and that shouldn't have happened, and the White House is looking at it, but that none of the information on there at any point threatened the operation or the lives of our servicemen. And in fact, it was a very successful operation, and it's an ongoing operation. But that was the intent behind it, and again, I think the Pentagon's made clear that nothing on there would have endangered the lives or the mission, and the mission's been very successful.
Is it classified, the information?
Well, the Pentagon says it was not, and not only did it say it was not, they make very clear that it didn't put in danger anyone's life or the mission. There was no intelligence information. And understand, when this story first broke, they were sort of alluding to were there war maps, or there was no war plans on there. This was a sort of description of what we could inform our counterparts around the world when the time came to do so. Again, look, I think the White House is looking at this entire thing. How did that journalist get on there? Why was this the appropriate? And I think there'll be reforms and changes made, so this was not going to happen again. It can't. But I wanted everybody to understand why this thing was even set up in the first place, and also understand very clearly the mission was successful, and at no point was it endangered. And that's coming from the highest-ranking officials at the agency that was in charge of the actual operation, which is the Pentagon.
Thank you so much for taking my question, Mr. Secretary. I just want to circle back to John's question, the Signal chat.
The Signal chat, yes.
But of course, are you planning on making the Europeans pay for U.S. operations against the Houthis? given that their businesses seem to benefit more from opening up these shipping lanes, as discussed in that chat? And then moving to Russia, Ukraine, I was wondering if you could elaborate on the Black Sea ceasefire deal and how it's progressing. President Zelensky has already questioned Russia's seriousness, saying, quote, they are trying to distort agreements and, in fact, to see both our intermediaries in the entire world.
So on the first question about, look, here's the problem, okay? These guys, these Houthis, these are pirates, okay? This is a band of, it's a gang, in essence. That's gotten control of a certain part, but these are a religious fanatic gang. And these guys have missiles, and they've launched 174 attacks against the U.S. Navy ships, 150-something attacks on commercial vessels. They are literally saying they've set up a toll system at the Red Sea. These ships can go, these ships cannot. They don't blow up the Chinese ships, they don't blow up somebody, but they blow up all the other ships. This is not sustainable. And so I think the point that I've made publicly is we are doing a great favor to the world. The United States is doing a great favor to the world, going after these guys' capability of doing this. How can we live in a world where a group like this has advanced weapons, okay, and can shut down a shipping lane and increase the cost of shipping that we're all paying for? Everything we buy, all the stuff is embedded in the cost and in the price of these things is how much it costs to ship it. And so that's just not a sustainable thing. We can't allow it. So I think the point I would make is not, we're going to make everybody pay. It's everybody should recognize we are doing the world a great favor going after these guys because this can't continue. This is unsustainable. What's next? Some gang's going to show up somewhere else and shut off another shipping lane. That's not practical. It cannot happen. So what was your first question? I was so fired up about that one that I forgot the other one. Oh, yes, that one. Easy ones. Well, look, I think yesterday our negotiators are en route, or perhaps they've already arrived, after spending, I think they met with the Ukrainians twice, the Russians once. What we have here is an agreement in principle on a Black Sea ceasefire. We got two things from that. The first is we have more detailed definition of what the energy ceasefire entails. And the second is the principle, concept of a Black Sea ceasefire. Obviously, after our meeting, as part of their release, the Russians detailed a number of conditions that they want to see met in order to do that. So we're going to evaluate that. Some of those conditions include sanctions that are not ours. They belong to the European Union. So we're going to be gathering and sort of when our folks get back, sitting down, going through the proposals, getting their impressions of the conversations so we can more fully understand what the Russian position is or what their ask is in exchange. And then we'll present that to the president, who will ultimately make a decision about what the next step here. I think it's a good thing that we have both the Ukrainians and the Russians talking about ceasefires, be they energy or be they potentially in the Black Sea. But obviously, this is hard and difficult work. This is a protracted almost 3.5-year war now, or 3-year war. It has a lot of framework of sanctions that have been built globally now that have to be looked at as part of an ultimate end to a conflict. There's a lot of things that have to be worked through. And I certainly think the only way you're going to make progress on these things is by engaging with both sides, understanding their asks, their demands, and seeing what's possible. So we're going to have a chance now to sort of sit down as a team and evaluate when they arrive in detail how the meetings went with the Ukrainians, how the meetings went with Russia, what are the Russians asking for, what are the Ukrainians asked for, compare all that, and then make a decision on that basis about what comes next in this process. In the end, the goal here is peace. The goal is to end a war where people are dying. And I think everyone should be happy that the United States is engaged in a process of ending a war and bringing about peace. It's not going to be easy. It won't be simple. It'll take some time. But at least we're on that road and we're talking about these things. And we're going to test it and see what's possible. We think we owe that to the world. And the president, I continue to say, is the only leader in the world right now, President Trump, who's in a position to even get these two nations to a city to talk about these things, albeit in rooms far apart from one another when these talks were going on. But nonetheless, they're talking. It's the first time in a while that we've seen any conversation about this. But we have a lot of work yet to be done, and we'll know more after we get the readout from our teams.